Chapter 1. The Craigslist Discovery. In the digital age, where convenience often overshadows caution, online platforms like Craigslist beckon with promises of opportunity. It was on one such platform that I stumbled upon a listing that would plunge me into a chilling ordeal. On a crisp autumn evening, as amber leaves danced in the gentle breeze outside my window, I found myself idly scrolling through Craigslist. Among the myriad listings for furniture, electronics, and odd jobs, a particular ad caught my eye: a vintage typewriter, described as a relic from a bygone era. Intrigued by the prospect of adding such a treasure to my collection of antiques, I clicked on the listing. The accompanying photos showcased the typewriter's elegant design and promised pristine condition, all at an affordable price. Without hesitation, I reached out to the seller, eager to arrange a meeting and secure the coveted item. Little did I know, this impulsive decision would lead me down a path fraught with danger and terror. But at that moment, as I eagerly anticipated the prospect of acquiring the typewriter, the shadows of the impending nightmare had yet to cast their ominous veil over my thoughts. Chapter 2. The Enigmatic Cabin. As dusk settled, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I found myself en route to the remote location designated for the meeting. The anticipation of acquiring the vintage typewriter fueled my excitement, overshadowing any sense of trepidation about the isolated setting. Navigating winding roads flanked by towering trees, I eventually arrived at the outskirts of town where the cabin stood. It emerged from the surrounding forest like a forgotten relic, its weathered facade hinting at years of neglect. Despite a nagging sense of unease, I pushed forward, driven by my desire to obtain the typewriter. Parking my car beside the cabin, I hesitated momentarily, my gaze lingering on the dilapidated structure. Its windows were dark, offering no glimpse of what lay within. With a deep breath, I stepped out into the cool evening air and approached the cabin, the crunch of fallen leaves beneath my feet punctuating the silence. As I reached the creaking wooden door, a knot formed in the pit of my stomach, a primal instinct warning me of potential danger. Ignoring the creeping sense of unease, I knocked hesitantly, the sound echoing eerily in the stillness of the forest. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior bathed in the warm glow of a flickering kerosene lamp. Standing before me was the seller, his features obscured by shadows, his figure looming ominously in the doorway. Despite the unsettling ambience, I forced a smile, exchanging polite greetings with the man. His disarming demeanor belied the foreboding atmosphere surrounding us, easing my initial apprehension. With a beckoning gesture, he invited me inside, and as I crossed the threshold into the cabin, I could sense the weight of the unknown pressing down upon me. Little did I realize, this seemingly innocuous transaction would soon descend into a nightmare beyond comprehension. Chapter 3. The Typewriter's Lair. Stepping into the dimly lit cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gripped me like a vice. The air inside was heavy, thick with a sense of foreboding that seemed to cling to the walls like cobwebs. Despite my growing discomfort, I followed the seller further into the musty interior. My eyes adjusted to the subdued light, revealing the cabin's sparse furnishings, a few worn chairs, a dusty rug strewn across the wooden floor, and the object of my desire, the vintage typewriter resting atop a weathered desk. Approaching the desk, I couldn't help but marvel at the typewriter's intricate design, its keys gleaming dully in the lamplight. The seller stood beside it, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. With a practiced hand, he demonstrated the typewriter's functionality, typing a few words onto a sheet of yellowed paper with an air of reverence. As the keys clacked rhythmically, a sense of unease settled over me, the weight of the cabin's oppressive atmosphere bearing down on my senses. Despite my growing discomfort, I forced a smile, eager to conclude the transaction and escape the suffocating ambience of the cabin. Handing over the agreed-upon sum of cash, I awaited the seller's confirmation, hoping to leave this unsettling place behind me. But as I prepared to depart, the man's demeanor shifted, his smile twisting into a sinister grin that sent a chill down my spine. With a voice laced with malice, he confessed to a macabre fascination with the occult, revealing his intent to harness the typewriter's purportedly supernatural powers for his own sinister purposes. Frozen in horror, I watched as he spoke, the darkness of his intentions casting a pall over the cabin's already oppressive atmosphere. It was then that I realized the true nature of the danger I had stumbled upon, a danger that threatened to consume me whole if I didn't act swiftly. Summoning every ounce of courage, I made a desperate bid for freedom, determined to escape the clutches of this malevolent force before it was too late. But little did I know, the true horrors awaiting me lay beyond the confines of the cabin, lurking in the shadows of the forest beyond. Chapter 4. Into the Abyss. As the man's chilling words hung in the air like a malevolent fog, I felt a surge of panic rising within me. My instincts screamed at me to flee, to escape the clutches of this twisted individual and the ominous aura that surrounded him. With trembling hands, I backed away from the desk, my eyes darting around the dimly lit cabin in search of an exit. But the man's gaze never wavered, his sinister grin widening as he advanced towards me, his presence suffocating in its intensity. Desperation clawed at my chest as I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my ears like a drumbeat of impending doom. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to escape the encroaching darkness before it swallowed me whole. But just as I reached the threshold of the cabin, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the flickering flame of the kerosene lamp, plunging the interior into total darkness. Panic seized me, my senses overwhelmed by the suffocating blackness that enveloped me like a shroud. In the oppressive silence, I could hear the man's low chuckle echoing through the void, his voice a twisted melody of malice and madness. With a surge of adrenaline, I pushed forward, stumbling blindly through the darkness in search of an escape. But as I groped my way through the cabin, my fingers brushing against the rough wooden walls, I realized with dawning horror that I was not alone. Something lurked in the shadows, something sinister and malevolent that hungered for my soul. With a primal scream tearing from my throat, I lunged for the door, flinging it open and stumbling out into the moonlit night. But even as I fled into the darkness, the echoes of the man's unholy laughter pursued me, haunting me like a ghostly specter. As I raced through the dense forest, branches clawing at my skin and thorns tearing at my clothes, I knew that I was running not only from the man and his twisted desires, but from something far more ancient and evil that lurked in the depths of the forest, waiting to claim me as its own. Chapter 5. The Pursuit of Shadows. Heart pounding and lungs burning, I dashed through the labyrinth of trees, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves beneath me. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow upon the forest, but its light offered little solace against the encroaching darkness that seemed to seep from every shadow. With each passing moment, the feeling of being hunted grew more palpable, a primal instinct urging me to flee from the unseen menace that lurked just beyond my sight. But no matter how fast I ran, I could not shake the sensation of being pursued by something ancient and malevolent, its presence like a cold breath against the back of my neck. Branches whipped against my face, leaving angry welts in their wake, but I dared not slow my pace. Every instinct screamed at me to keep moving, to put as much distance between myself and the horrors of that cabin as possible. But just as I began to fear that my strength would fail me, a faint glimmer of light appeared through the trees ahead. With renewed determination, I pushed forward, my legs pumping furiously as I raced towards the distant beacon of hope. As I burst through the dense foliage into a small clearing, relief washed over me like a tidal wave. Before me stood a deserted road, its cracked asphalt illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. It was a lifeline in the darkness, a path to safety in a world gone mad. With a final burst of energy, I stumbled onto the road, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I collapsed onto the cold pavement. For a moment, I lay there, panting and trembling, my senses reeling from the ordeal I had just endured. But even as I caught my breath, I knew that my ordeal was far from over. The shadows still whispered of unseen terrors lurking just beyond the edge of perception, waiting to drag me back into the abyss from which I had escaped. With a shudder, I forced myself to my feet, casting one last glance into the darkness before setting off down the road, determined to put as much distance between myself and that cursed cabin as humanly possible. Little did I know, the true horrors awaiting me lay not in the darkness of the forest, but in the depths of my own soul. Chapter 6. Seeking Sanctuary. The deserted road stretched out before me like a lifeline in the darkness, leading me away from the horrors of the forest and towards the promise of safety. With each step I took, the weight of the ordeal I had just endured pressed down upon me like a suffocating blanket, threatening to overwhelm my senses. Despite the chill in the air, sweat trickled down my brow, mingling with the dirt and grime that coated my skin. Every nerve in my body was on edge, my senses hyper-alert to the slightest sound or movement in the surrounding darkness. As I stumbled along the desolate road, my mind raced with thoughts of escape and survival. Where could I find sanctuary from the unseen horrors that pursued me? Was there anyone I could trust in this world turned upside down by fear and madness? With a sense of grim determination, I pushed forward, my footsteps echoing hollowly in the silence of the night. The road seemed to stretch on indefinitely, winding its way through the heart of the forest, like a serpent seeking its prey. But just as despair threatened to consume me whole, a faint glimmer of light appeared in the distance, like a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. With a surge of adrenaline, I quickened my pace, driven by the desperate need to reach the safety of whatever sanctuary lay ahead. As I drew closer, the light resolved into the dim glow of a solitary cabin nestled amidst the trees. It was a humble abode, its walls weathered by time and neglect, but to my weary eyes, it seemed like a fortress against the encroaching darkness. With trembling hands, I approached the cabin, my heart pounding in my chest like a drumbeat of anticipation. Could this humble refuge offer me the sanctuary I so desperately sought, or was it merely another trap waiting to ensnare me in its clutches? With a prayer on my lips, I reached for the door, my hand trembling as I pushed it open, and stepped inside, hoping against hope that I had finally found salvation in this world gone mad. Little did I know, the true horrors awaiting me within those walls would make the nightmares of the forests seem like a child's bedtime story. Chapter 7. The Cabin's Secrets. As the door creaked open, revealing the dimly lit interior of the cabin, a sense of trepidation washed over me like a cold wave. The air inside was thick with the scent of old wood and decay, and shadows danced across the walls like specters of the past. Stepping cautiously into the cabin, I cast a wary glance around the room, taking in the sparse furnishings and the flickering glow of a single oil lamp. The atmosphere was heavy with silence, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire in the hearth and the distant rustle of leaves outside. Despite the solitude of the cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if unseen eyes lurked in the shadows, observing my every move. With a shiver, I pushed the thought aside, determined to focus on finding some semblance of safety in this unfamiliar place. As I explored further into the cabin, my eyes fell upon a small writing desk tucked away in the corner of the room. Upon its weathered surface sat a collection of old books and trinkets, their presence hinting at the mysteries that lay hidden within the cabin's walls. Curiosity piqued, I approached the desk, my fingers tracing the faded spines of the books as I scanned their titles. Many were unfamiliar to me, their contents shrouded in the mists of time, but one in particular caught my eye, a tattered journal bound in cracked leather. With trembling hands, I lifted the journal from its resting place, the weight of its secrets heavy in my grasp. Flipping open the cover, I began to read, my heart pounding in my chest as the words on the yellowed pages revealed the dark history of the cabin and its previous occupants. As I delved deeper into the journal's entries, I uncovered tales of madness and despair, of a family torn apart by tragedy and a darkness that lurked just beyond the edges of reality. It seemed that the cabin held secrets far more sinister than I could have ever imagined, secrets that threatened to consume me whole if I dared to delve too deep. But even as fear gripped me like a vice, I knew that I could not turn away from the truth that lay hidden within those pages. For the answers I sought, however terrifying they may be, were the only hope I had of surviving the horrors that lurked in the darkness outside. And so, with trembling hands and a pounding heart, I continued to read, determined to uncover the secrets of the cabin before it was too late. Chapter 8. Confronting the Darkness. As I delved deeper into the journal's pages, the revelations within sent shivers down my spine. The cabin's history was steeped in tragedy and darkness, its walls bearing witness to unspeakable horrors that had unfolded within its confines. The journal spoke of a family that had once called the cabin home, a father driven to madness by grief, a mother consumed by despair, and a son lost to the darkness that lurked within the forest. Theirs was a tale of sorrow and suffering, of a descent into madness from which there could be no escape. But as I read on, I began to sense a pattern emerging, a connection between the events of the past and the nightmares that haunted me in the present. It seemed that the darkness that had consumed the cabin's previous inhabitants now sought to claim me as its own, drawing me ever deeper into its malevolent embrace. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I realized that there was no escaping the horrors that lurked within these walls. The cabin was a prison, a trap from which there was no escape, and I was its unwitting prisoner. But even as despair threatened to overwhelm me, a spark of defiance flared within my heart. I refused to surrender to the darkness, to allow fear to dictate my actions. With a newfound sense of determination, I resolved to confront the horrors that lurked within the cabin and put an end to their reign of terror once and for all. Arming myself with whatever makeshift weapons I could find, I prepared to face the darkness head-on. With each step I took, my resolve hardened, until finally, I stood at the threshold of the cabin's deepest, darkest secrets. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the heart of darkness. The shadows closed in around me, their icy fingers reaching out to drag me into the abyss. But I refused to falter, to give in to the despair that threatened to consume me. For in that moment, I realized that the true power to overcome the darkness lay not in weapons or strength, but in the light of courage and hope that burned brightly within my soul. And with that realization, I plunged into the heart of the darkness, ready to face whatever horrors awaited me on the other side.